Hi, I'm Susan Pinkwater, founder of Thrivability, and welcome to this Accessible Life web series. Currently, there are 1 billion people in the world with a physical disability, being the largest global minority, and 1 billion people over the age of 65 being the fastest growing demographic. Over the next 20 years, these numbers are going to double. This web series will host one session every month to discuss ways in which we can prepare, because everything in our homes, our cities, and our lives is going to need to change. We're having these discussions to raise awareness, create more engagement, and to shift mindsets from viewing these issues as problems to ways to avoid legal battles to opportunities. Today's panel is about the sport, the great equalizer. It can bring community, health, and a sense of belonging, but not necessarily if you're a person with a physical disability. Research shows a high level of interest in sport and physical activity in people with physical disabilities, but several barriers prevent participation, including the cost of equipment, awareness, accessible travel, partners in training, and much more. So, a little housekeeping for today. If you want or need closed captioning, it is unfortunately not automatic, so please turn it on your own computer. And if you have questions or thoughts, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And now I'd like to introduce you to the panelists.
Hi, my name is Patrick Lawrence, and I'm the Chief Programs Officer at Challenged Athletes Foundation, or CAF. CAF is a nonprofit organization with the goal to empower people with permanent physical disabilities to lead an active lifestyle through sports and athletics. Our primary means of support is through a grant program that allows people to request adaptive sport equipment, funds for coaching and training, travel and competition expenses. In addition to our grant program, we lead introductory clinics to let people know about the different opportunities that are available in adaptive sports. We also provide community outreach, mentorship opportunities. I'm looking forward to this discussion today and working together with all of you to help provide more opportunity in the world of adaptive sports for people with physical disabilities.
Hello, my name is Emily Glassner, and I am the president and CEO of Achilles International. Achilles is the leading adaptive running nonprofit in the world. We've been around for 41 years. I've been in this role for 5 years, and I am honored and privileged to be a part of the effort to break down barriers to participation for people with disabilities in sports. In specific, we focus on creating accessible and inclusive and equitable opportunities for people with disabilities around running. And I'm really pleased to be here today to talk about the importance of adaptive athletics and the challenges that we face and the opportunities that are in front of us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Verkeilen. I'm a disability rights advocate, cancer survivor, ultra marathoner, and I serve as the director of impact campaigns for the Amputee Coalition, where I lead So Everybody Can Move, which is our national healthcare and disability rights initiative that is creating equitable access to physical activity for individuals with disabilities like myself. Currently, in the U.S. healthcare system, we can't get access to prosthetic and orthotic care for physical activity because it's considered not medically necessary. We're sparking legislative change throughout the country to upend the status quo on this and ensure that our community can have access. I'm excited to be with you today as part of the Thrivability webinar and to share our ultimate vision of sparking a disability revolution. Thank you.
Hi, here we all are. Okay, so that was a video. I think it covered most stuff. The webinar is broken up into 3 sections. So the first section we're going to look at, it's going to be about 10 minutes each section, benefits and barriers to adaptive sport and exercise. And the second section, we're going to look at some of the ways that we're helping people to get to the start line, which is, we think competition is hard, just getting there is
pretty hard. And then the last section, we're going to look at what is the vision for where this is all going to go and could go. And then we'll have QA at the end. So about to begin, I also wanted to thank, we have a new media sponsor, Profound, and I just wanted to welcome them. Profound is a professional network amplifying disability leadership. I see Nicole nodding. So we're happy to have you. So we are going to begin. I'm going to ask Emily if she can take a few minutes, because not everybody here really understands why are we here and what are we talking about. So if you can just talk a little bit about what are the benefits, why is this important, and what are some of the barriers, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank you, Susan, for convening this group and coordinating this conversation. And I'm particularly honored to be here with two people I admire and two organizations I admire very much. You know, Patrick with CAF and Nicole through Everybody Moves. So I'm just honored. So thank you. So I guess talking first about the benefits, I mean, the obvious movement benefits are overall health, and that's emotional and physical. We know the instances of, for this particular population, negative health outcomes, both physical and psychological, and movement and athletics can mitigate that. So that is crucial. I mean, we live better, we live longer, we have improved relationships. Those are all obviously clear benefits. I know in the work that we do, and we work with people with disabilities of all different kinds. So it's not just physical, right? There are a lot of cognitive issues, that chronic illnesses, traumatic brain injury, and so forth. And recently, we just completed our, fall marathon season with over 560 community members participating in the New York City Marathon. And when we see our athletes join at that start line and then cross that finish line, the sense of accomplishment opens us up to a world of possibility that previously may have been distant, right? So that's a huge benefit. If people can see what they can accomplish, and it doesn't have to be a marathon, right? It can be a mile walk, a 5K roll. Once they see what they're capable of, it opens them up to a whole new world of possibilities, both in terms of professional and their personal lives. Community, obviously, another great benefit. The community building power of sport. So the benefits cannot be, overstated. The barriers are real. And I think you alluded to them, Susan. It has to do with the accessibility of equipment for those individuals who need adaptive equipment to get to the start line and cross that finish line. It's financial, because we know the expense of this equipment is great. And thanks to CAF, that is addressed for so many Achilles athletes and others who receive various generous grants so that they can have access to adaptive equipment. There's a barrier around, feeling like they don't belong. People aren't speaking to this audience, aren't inviting them, right, to be a part. And if I don't know I belong, I'm not going to show up. Right. And if I don't see myself in that marathon field, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to go. So that's another barrier, in accessible environments in general. So I will stop there, but it's a challenge. But I know that all of us here are looking to break those down.
Thank you. And I think people don't realize like how important all of this is. I mean, equipment is expensive and difficult to get, but it's also just being able to see yourself or someone close to you and even imagine that it's possible. You know, and one of the things that got me going a long time ago about this is that when you get a good job, the first thing, one of your first benefits is you get a gym membership because your company wants you healthy and well. And then we'll get into it with Nicole. She'll talk more about insurance and what they think about that. So thank you. And Patrick, I wanted to know, can you, I don't know, bring to life a little bit, like what is CAF doing? And you spoke in the intro a little bit about the types of things that it does. But if you have, whether it's an example or, you know, why can't people get equipment where, you know, and how do you get it to them and what happens?
Yeah, no, thank you, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel. To echo what Emily said, honored to be here with her and with Nicole. I just saw Nicole last weekend at our big event in San Diego, and it's a fundraising event to allow us to do the things that we do best, which is try to help remove these barriers. The greatest of those, honestly, and the reason we got started is because it is prohibitively expensive to acquire a lot of the equipment that's needed to go out and compete or even just to participate as an individual with a physical disability. You know, if you want to talk about what some of the costs are, and I've been at CAF for about 9 years, and I've seen the costs go up prohibitively. Right now, in the past couple of years, cost for sport wheelchairs, hand cycles, things like that have risen about 15 to 20%. Over the course of the time that I've been at CAF, we used to have pricing for sport chairs for basketball could be anywhere from $2,800. Bottom line now is it's probably a base model chair is going to cost closer to $4,500 to $5,000, which is way more than my first car cost. Myself a bit to have used that as a reference, but the reality is that you're talking about a group of individuals who, you know, in some cases are on social security or SSDI income. There's not a lot of expendable funds there to spend on things like this. So, you know, we do try to help remove those barriers to get people the equipment that they need. But another thing that we really try to do is if people already have the adaptive sport equipment, or if they don't have access, or if they maybe don't require adaptive sport equipment, is to help them to get the coaching and the training to participate in groups like Achilles, who do the day-to-day. We really try to help get people either the funding or the equipment that they need, because it's really, really tough to afford those things. Other barriers that are in place is transportation, honestly, to get people to and from. Some of our grant funding helps to offset some of those costs. So really what our main crux is to make sure that we are getting people what they need to empower them to be individuals with an active lifestyle, and to help connect them to do so. And I think that's probably a little bit more in one of the other questions, but at a base level, that's really what we try to do, remove those barriers to participation.
Great, thank you. And just to give a bigger picture, so a running blade that someone maybe who wants to be a Paralympian, like how much is that running blade? Because they're not a Paralympian yet. They're like, I want to start training, I want to start running, and maybe someday I'll be one. So, but how much is a running blade like that?
I don't know that I can completely disclose that. We have a very great partnership with OSER, our prosthetic provider, but I will say that if you were to take what it's going to cost, building out a new socket, getting all the fittings done, that can run in the neighborhood of probably $12,000 to $15,000. And it's something that, as Nicole will elaborate on, is not something that the insurance will cover. It seems a little counterintuitive. Get someone on a prosthetic leg, let them run, save money on long-term health issues. But for some reason, insurance companies don't see it that way. And it's even tough to get just everyday legs and everyday componentry. So that's a place where we kind of jump in and we try to help fill the gap to the best of our ability with our prosthetic feet and knees for high activity individuals to get out and run and keep themselves healthy.
So quick last question, more rhetorical than anything else. So let's say someone is 13 and they just want to run around with their friends. They just want to get out and play. How much is that leg, for example?
Oh, it's probably what I'd referred to previously, probably in that 12.5 to 15,000 if you're going to pay it out of pocket.
Right.
That's one of those things where, again, it's not billable, so it's going to have to come as an out of pocket expense. And so we try to provide that ongoing program for our prosthetic grants to get those to people so they can get out and be active.
Thank you, and thank goodness for CAF. So Nicole, you can give us a real life story, I think, of just, what is the experience of a person who just wants to run? And I know you have a story, so if you wouldn't mind sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan, thanks so much for having me on here, and just an absolute honor to be here with Emily and Patrick as well. I've personally benefited both from CAF and Achilles as an individual with disability, and I'll kind of share that in terms of my story. But yeah, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma when I was 10 years old, and pretty quickly after that diagnosis had to have my left leg amputated below the knee. And, my parents and I made that decision to really save my life and so that I could have, a wonderful future. But what we were really surprised to learn was that insurance would only cover one prosthesis. And I was told that I couldn't go in the water with it, despite living in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. And I was also not supposed to be, incredibly physically active, or it wasn't meant for running. And so that was extremely limiting for me as a kid, especially as a kid who identified as an athlete, who was winning, the presidential fitness test, coming in first in the mile. It was, quite debilitating to then be left with something that wasn't meant or allow me to, play with my peers. So growing up, I, tried to do as much as I could, was constantly breaking my foot in gym class, ended up making it onto my varsity softball team, playing there. Going to college and then getting into running with a number of my friends. And that's when it really started to catch up to me, where I was ended up breaking my foot every 6 months when it was supposed to last 3 to 5 years, because I was running on a walking prosthesis, training for my first half marathon with one of my best friends. And then I ended up in physical therapy twice a week because I was running my pelvis out of alignment and just had incredible back pain. And at that time, I was working at the University of Michigan and was working with a number of individuals in the environmental space, climate activists, and just started, my background's not in policy or advocacy, but I started to kind of learn from what they were doing and really just started to question the healthcare landscape. And for me, as a person with a disability, I was 25 years old at that time, and just questioning, why is it that I can't get access to a running blade when I see these in the media and I see that people do have access to this. And so at that point, I decided to quit my job and start an awareness journey, which we ended up calling Forest Stump. And we did a 1,500-mile triathlon down the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego. Did it all on a walking prosthesis because that was all I had, and to really show that, I had the will, the energy, the determination to go do this. But, the biggest question was whether or not my prosthesis that was, mandated by my insurance company would survive that journey. And at the end of that is really where the stars aligned. I was able to attend the Challenged Athletes Foundation's big event of the year that Patrick had mentioned at the start. And that's when I ended up being granted my first ever running blade, which was just incredible for me. And through that experience, had the opportunity to finally get fit with one as a result of, more pro bono care from my prosthetist. But really just started to look at it from an advocacy lens that, no one should have to go to that length, doing a 1,500-mile event to get noticed or to prove that they deserve access to something. And so that's really what has pushed me into this advocacy space that I'll share a little more about in terms of so everybody can move. But just want to share that, as a result of getting access to that prosthesis, when I put it on for the first time, it, finally felt like I had my leg back, and just the energy return. It's been incredible. And so since then, 16 years after my amputation that I got access to that running blade. And now I've been able to kind of unleash my athletic potential. I've run the Boston Marathon the past 2 years, coming in second place for the female para category. And I just want to give a shout out to Achilles. Joe Lamar was at the finish line in Boston this past year and pretty much, it was a tough race, and he ended up being able to take me to the med tent to get some help at the end because of all the heat. But just want to say thank you, to CAF and Achilles for the work that they're doing, and fill in the gap of what's really needed for people with disabilities.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that kind of lays out where we are today, and why are we here? Why are we all in these little squares? Because these are issues that there are some ways that your organizations are dealing with, and then there needs to be more. And so what for Emily, I was going to ask you, and again, if I'm asking one person, if someone else has something to say, do. So I wanted to see, like, what can we do today with what we have in place that will make athletes, or make people who don't even know that they're athletes, feel welcome, feel capable, and know even where to go or what to do?
Well, I think, first it begins with us all linking arms here, right? Because the more we can support each other and make sure that we are amplifying the opportunities that each of us and so many other leaders in the space are making available, I think that that's really important. In the endurance event and running space, we need race organizers and other providers of the adaptive equipment to truly create that space of belonging. We need race organizers to speak to this constituency to let them know that they belong. We need corporate sponsors to put some dollars behind it, because we know, unfortunately, that all too often is what moves the needle. And we have some terrific partners who support the work that we do. Cigna, General Motors, Hoka is a partner of ours, TD Bank. And they, not only did they put their names on the adaptive athletics movement, but they engage their employees. And I think that's really important. But just making sure that people who are not aware, that we educate them and that we bring them along. I think we see in the adaptive running space all too often, I'm talking a lot about race organizers, but that's where we do our advocacy, truthfully. Race organizers are afraid to begin to welcome people in. They're afraid of making a mistake. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we move away from this cancel culture and this punitive approach, because we need the partnership of those kinds of people to, again, create those spaces of belonging.
And thank you. And I would add, because this is where I come in, where I'm different from all of you, is that corporate engagement can make all the difference. Whether it's making people feel welcome and making things feel possible at their job, but also through their media and through the storytelling that corporations have a platform, or many platforms, that no one else has that kind of power. And so the more that we can help them understand how important this is and how many people it impacts, and as well as the products that they can make that they may not yet realize. So thank you.
Yeah, and on that, Susan, I'm sorry, just to add really quickly, in all of these companies, there are employees with disabilities.
Yes.
And there are caregivers, for people with disabilities. So it affects all of us. It behooves corporations to support not only those that they serve, but those who are under their roof and doing the work. So.
Yeah. So thank you. So Nicole, I'm gonna ask you for another story, not a story, but this is part 2. And so we're looking at what are some of the things we can do now? What are some of the solutions to make real change? And I know you have your initiative, so everybody can move. And can you tell us a little bit about it, how it came to be, and where you are now? Because it's amazing, the progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been in the works for the past 7 years. As I had mentioned, when we did our forest stump journey down the coast, that was back in 2017. I didn't have any background in policy advocacy. My background's in business and marketing, which actually has a lot of interactions between policy because it's really, who can tell the best story. But, in that time, I've been really kind of digging into the issue. And I think for me as a person with a disability, and even when I did the journey down the coast, I didn't know anyone else in the disability community. And so part of my questioning was like, wow, did I just get really unlucky, growing up in Minnesota in a rural community? Maybe it was just me that didn't have access. And so a key part of my journey early on was just going out and doing a listening tour and meeting other people with disabilities and trying to understand, what is their experience with getting access to prosthetics for physical activity or wheelchairs or sighted guides. And that's when I just started to learn that, this is a systemic issue. This isn't just something that happened to me because I, lived in a certain town. Although, of course, there are equity issues even greater. The fact that I was even able to discover CAF to begin with, happened at a wedding, just meeting someone who worked for CAF and all of those, kind of chances. But because of, that knowledge of this being a systemic issue, that's really where kind of our focus has been from a policy perspective, is that we need to have a solution that's rooted in justice, that's rooted in equal rights, and something that will be able to kind of change the tide for generations to come. And so ended up moving to DC, doing a health policy and advocacy fellowship with the National Association for the Advancement of Orthotics and Prosthetics. And then from there started to get involved with kind of the orthotic and prosthetic industry and landscape, eventually joining the American Orthotic and Prosthetic Association about 3 years ago. And it was during my time at that we had one of the first bills in the country in Maine get enacted that required insurance to cover prosthetics for physical activity for children under the age of 18. And prior to that, we had been kind of going towards more of a federal strategy, trying to understand, maybe how could we, tackle this whole thing for prosthetics, orthotics, wheelchairs, sighted guides. And we just realized that strategy was too big to start with. And so when this policy was enacted in Maine, we realized, okay, here's our window, like here's our foot in the door. And so we ended up starting the initiative as So Kids Can Move. And it quickly ended up growing into So Everybody Can Move because of the advocates that we were recruiting. And they were saying, just doing this for kids isn't good enough. We want this for all ages, and just them kind of continuing to push the envelope. And so that launched 2 years ago. And I'm excited to say that we've got 38 states that have now been recruited as part of the coalition. So 38 state coalitions that we're working with. We've been able to enact 8 bills across the country in the past 2 years. And we're gearing up for 2025, and we're expected to have 15 to 20 bills in 2025. So the momentum has just taken off, and it's pretty incredible how this has, gone from a, state by state initiative to really a movement that it's creating across the country. And, I'm here in DC, and we were just meeting to talk about our strategic plan for So Everybody Can Move moving forward. And a big part of that is our goal of 28 by 28, which is to enact this legislation in 28 states by the Los Angeles 2028 Paralympics, so that we can then pursue federal reform and have a federal bill. So once we get past 25 states. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of what So Everybody Can Move is doing. Right now we're, focused on orthotics and prosthetics, but definitely see this as an opportunity to expand, beyond that to wheelchairs, to sighted guides, and really just this general vision of the legislation is not only changing the landscape from a physical activity perspective, but really around this concept of well-being and access to the mental, emotional, financial, and physical well-being that people with disabilities need. So, I mean, even in some of our states, they're testing the waters with the legislation and saying, hey, what about prosthetics for showering and bathing? And we're like, all right, let's add that in. Let's see how big we can grow this. So it's been incredible, and we're really excited for the future of So Everybody Can Move, and having, partners like Achilles and CAF, and building a broader coalition of national organizations that can be part of this and lend their voices to this as well.
That's great. Thank you. And I remember us talking, I guess it was 3 years ago. Was it that long ago? When it was first so
So kids can move.
so kids can move. And I remember
Yeah.
us discussing that, going, it's gotta go bigger. But also knowing that the Maine, the legislature in Maine was changed in the same way that people find CAF, in the same way everything seems to happen, just the two right people happened to meet at that moment. And they were like, oh, I don't know why we don't do this, and started doing it. So it's more proof that the more awareness there is, the more happenstance meetings there'll be, and ultimately it can become just mainstream knowledge, which is the dream. And one thing I wanted to ask, well, two things I want to ask Patrick, is that there are two discussions that always happen in this when talking about adaptive sports. It's like, are you talking about a kid or an average person who wants to go for a hike with friends or take a walk or a jog, or are you talking about a Paralympian? And, in the mainstream athletics, you're not saying, oh, do you want to be an Olympian or do you want to go for a run? It's not really the question, although because there's equipment and expensive stuff, it becomes a question. So I wanted to ask you, Patrick, for people, both sides, like for someone who just wants to take a better run and doesn't have like Move United or some organization and coaches writing grant proposals to CAF. So how do they get equipment or engagement, or even know about it? And on the other side of, I'd love to know your role in the Paralympic pipeline.
That's a lot to consider, Susan.
In
yeah.
3 sentences.
Need to have you reload those questions. So the first, I think we strive to support everyone at all levels. I mean, if you think about, it's really easy to market Paralympians. I mean, I think, America is a very, a country who we like to highlight our successes, and we really promote the elites. The reality is, whether it's Olympics or Paralympics, most of the people who are at that level are the teeny tiny tip of the pyramid. We're serving people up and down that pyramid, but the greatest number of people that we're really serving are the people who are just wanting to be active, just get out, go for a walk, go for a run, go for a spin on their bike or their hand cycle. Just enjoy being out in movement. To go back to it, movement is medicine. And if you can get that movement in, if you can have the access to it, it increases self-esteem and it increases employability. I mean, there's stats that show that, people with a disability who are physically active, who are involved in sport, or whether it's team sport or individual, there are higher rates of employment that are correlated to that. So I think we all probably know the benefits, but the barriers persist up and down that pyramid. Even people who are in that Paralympic pipeline, still, until they meet a certain standard, they're still self-funding a lot of what they get. So that's where, again, we're trying to help stem those gaps to the best of our ability. We're a, smallish nonprofit organization, and so we do the best we can. There's a ton of need that we cannot address, and that's where, to some degree, I think onto your next question, is one of the challenges and that we run into is, how do you find out about it? I think that across the adaptive sport landscape is something, in my opinion, is that it's a lot of this is that as a society, we don't always give people the opportunity to see beyond what a society was built for people who are non-disabled, provide to people who have a disability. And so I think there's a lowered expectation, which is terribly unfair. But by virtue of getting in contact with people who are breaking through their personal barriers and then connecting with others who are traveling a similar path, we give more opportunity for a community to be built. And that's why groups like Achilles, and when Nicole started out, you start to build your tribe. You find who it is that can really relate to what it is that you're doing. You have a sense of community, and that inspires more and more participation. I will frequently tell people that the grants we give are great. The clinics that we run can be life-changing. The most important thing that we do is introduce people to a community, because without that community, all the rest of this stuff it can be kind of a moment in time. A grant is fantastic. I can get a running prosthetic to someone, we can get a sport chair to someone, but if they don't have people with whom to participate,
Yeah.
that those things can sit in a corner and get really dusty. So
Yeah.
groups like Achilles, all the programs within the Move United kind of umbrella, those are the people who are doing the day-to-days, and all the volunteers and all the mentors who are helping to introduce people to adaptive sport and then foster that growth are key to really providing the access. And then we'll jump in and we'll do our part as to the best that we can. But those people who are the boots on the ground, who are all over the country doing those things, that's really the secret sauce, is the community.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. Thank you. And I know that there are a couple of organizations in Europe that are making less expensive adaptive sport equipment. But it's also just like everything else, it happens in these silos. And I think both are really working towards building community and getting groups together and doing things, which it seems to be the most important approach, because I've seen many running blades sitting in closets because they're hard to use, they hurt, you fall. So if you don't have the people around you literally holding you up, they don't get used. So the device is just a small piece of the bigger picture. And which made me think, also talking about knowing about these organizations in other countries. I remember going to a CAF gala event, I don't know, 8 years ago, maybe. And it's been a while. And this woman from, I think, Egypt received a racing chair. And it was this amazing moment. Everybody cried, which is good. But it made me realize that this problem, I started to realize then, is global. This is not just America. We can like get down on America and insurance, but every country is having this issue. So I want to see, is CAF doing anything in other countries, and can this be a global movement? I guess that's also for Nicole. It's for whoever wants to answer.
Yeah, I would say, Susan, from a CAF perspective, we do try to help support to some degree in other countries. Our need is really great right here in the United States. So the majority of our funding does stay in the US. But we do probably 10% or so of our annual grant support goes out to other countries. We try to be as generous with that as we can. But again, the reality is that the need far exceeds our ability to support. So we try to be as judicious as possible and get the help to the people that need it.
And Emily, I know that Achilles is international. Your head is blocking the first half of that word.
Oh,
but
is it?
Chanel. There it is.
There you go. Yeah, so we have a presence in 17 other countries around the globe. And, some of them are Western European, pretty developed countries. Others are, arguably third world. And what you see in those countries is that they're marginalized, people with disabilities, and really treated extremely poorly. So the work that we do in Ecuador, the work that we do in South Africa, around Johannesburg, this is really important because not only for the individuals that we're serving, for all the reasons that Patrick very eloquently articulated, and Nicole, those benefits, but also to demonstrate to people, what's possible. I mean, that just because I get to that start line a little differently than you do, and I cross that finish line and maybe with a different modality, I can achieve just as much as you can. So that's a really important part of the work that we do in some of these other countries. We have a big presence in Mongolia. We are arguably the only organization serving the community of people with disabilities in Mongolia, and that includes a very substantial population of kids that we work with there. So it's very gratifying. I mean, obviously, as Patrick said, the need is great here, but it it's also very important in other corners of the globe.
Mhm.
I'd love to weigh in on that too from an international policy perspective. So there are other countries that are doing a great job at this. In Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom, not surprising, they have universal healthcare systems that are allowing for access to prosthetics for physical activity. But the US is also doing a good job at this in certain payer systems, which I think we have to remind ourselves that, within the Veterans Administration, VA system of healthcare, you can get access to secondary prostheses for physical activity, also within workman's comp. So right now in the US, it is the fact that how you lose your leg can dictate what you get access to. And this was something, growing up in both Minnesota and in Michigan, I had chatted as we started kind of getting into some of the policies of no-fault auto insurance. Basically talking to my parents, it would have been more beneficial if my parents had run my leg over with a car than to have lost it to cancer, because then I would have been covered under no-fault auto insurance and I would have been able to get access to a running blade. So that's something, within the US healthcare system that we have to solve, and just realize that we're already doing this within the US and there are other countries that are leading the way. And it's, time for us to be able to get, our commercial payers, Medicaid, Medicare on board with it as well. And I think at the end of the day, what this is about is who should pay for this. And this is medical care. And so insurance companies should be the ones that are paying for this. It needs to stay within, the healthcare system of them providing access to this. But I could not agree more with what Patrick and Emily shared about the importance of community. I remember when I got down to San Diego and got to attend the event, it was like this mecca of, people with disabilities all being in one place together. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And I know that it transformed my own self-confidence and self-esteem as a person with a disability to have that. So it's really about all of us, working together and providing access in all the different ways that a person with a disability needs access.
Thank you. So our time is going so fast. I guess what I wanted to now is ask, we kind of talked about what is the situation, where do we come from? We're talking about where we are and how we're managing it. I would love to hear from each of you in our last few minutes, your vision for what's next? What could this look like in the next 5 years or so? So I'll start with Emily, just because you're on that side of my screen.
Right. Well, I mean, again, for Achilles, I mean, we're trying to touch as many lives as possible. And that takes a lot of grassroots effort, because we find, as Patrick sort of alluded to, our greatest recruiters are our existing athletes. I mean, you need someone to bring, it can be pretty intimidating, right? To join a community where you may not know anybody, and to do an activity that you may not have engaged in either for a while or ever. So, increasing the size of our community, but making sure that it's impact first growth. So we're trying to touch as many lives as possible. We're trying to make sure that there's belonging in all of these races and in parks and on trails around the globe. And that's taking a lot of work, because it's awareness building, it's education, it's bringing corporations along with us. Thanks to the work of Nicole, there's a lot of the work that's being done at the state and federal level, and that will make a big difference. We're just trying to continue to raise our voice and create as much opportunity in our lane, and hope that spreads to other parts of this landscape.
Thank you. And I know, there's a lot of talk these days about belonging, and wanting people to feel like they belong and feel welcome. And for people with physical challenges, the first step in belonging is being able to get to the park and act and move within the park. And so, our first webinar was on accessible cities, but it was kind of intentional, because you can't begin to do anything if you can't even get there. So I think belonging and accessibility, how can we redesign our parks to think about for not accessible design, but inclusive design. So it's everybody, and our gyms and our, like Equinox, are they thinking about this? Right? So thank you. And Patrick, what's your vision for where it's gonna, hopefully CAF will not have to raise so much money in the future, and you'll be able to do more things,
That would be a lovely problem to have.
right?
I think we're fortunate to have built a really nice platform, and I think we're very intentional about the work that we try to do. There is a finite amount of money that we can raise every year that goes out to grants. So I think it's really being intentional for us to figure out in what other ways can we support. Is it a more formal mentorship role? Is it a more understanding how people kind of get lost in the wilderness, and then how do they kind of find their way through to meet groups like Achilles? Do they, is it a matter of getting more exposure to them? Is it partnering? I feel personally like that's something that we need to do more of, because it's there are parts of the United States that are very much an adaptive sport desert. There's nothing going on if you don't already know someone, or you can't kind of loop in a virtual capacity, then it's really tough to get your start. So I think it lies there. I also think that the healthcare kind of spectrum could be huge in terms of advocating for more adaptive sport. We've been working with the American Physical Therapy Association, the AAPMNR. We've helped them run some adaptive sport zones at their national symposium, just to get this out in front of clinicians. That's going to be the common thread.
Yeah.
Anyone with a physical disability is your rehab team, your physicians, your nurse practitioners, et cetera. So the more they know that this exists, the more it exists as a referral source to say, hey, did you know this is possible? And look at all the things you can do to help improve your quality of life. So I think there's some really cool possibilities on the horizon to increase the awareness. And by virtue of doing so, maybe we start to pull in more corporations, more other nonprofits who can work together collaboratively to try to address some of these issues that we're all kind of collectively facing.
Thank you. And Nicole, I remember us working on another thing a few years ago, trying to create that kind of cheat sheet for prosthetists to be able to order adaptive sport equipment. Because when they try, and they just say, oh, this person is really athletic, they want to stay on their school team, they want an instantly athletic team, they get a no. So the way it's designed, all the keywords are the words that a prosthetist would use normally to advocate. So we wanted to create that cheat sheet for how, like, it's like choose your own journey. Like when you get no, then you do this. And if you get yes, then you, so yes, I guess I'm confirming, Patrick, what you were saying, that it starts with the prosthetists and the rehab, and the more they know, the more empowered they become. So Nicole, do you have some last words for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that piece on the whole ecosystem, right? From education to the rehab professionals to the technology and the care that people are receiving, that all needs to change. And I think it's interesting to think about the next 5 to 10 years by looking back on the past 20 years of my experience of being an amputee, and how, I have personally benefited from the movements that CAF and Achilles have started in terms of changing the perspective on people with disabilities. And I've been treated so differently from when I was first an amputee to now. And because of this kind of social change movement, where it's not a surprise that I'm out, running on a running blade, and that I'm treated with a different level of kind of respect and admiration versus kind of pity or shock and awe, or if you can do it, I can do it type of mentality, but more of just a general baseline respect. Like we're on the same level here, which I think is incredible that we've been able to achieve that over the past 20 years from like a social change perspective. And I would love to see us continue that in the next 5 to 10 years. But something I'm personally excited about is also how So Everybody Can Move and the work that we're doing to change policy is also going to incentivize the community to have new options for people from a technology perspective that we haven't even seen before. This past weekend, I was doing a 50K, my first 50K trail race in Oregon. And it had about 5,500 feet of vertical elevation throughout it. And I wore my running blade the entire time, but there were points in the course where I was like, man, I really wish that I had a hiking leg and that it was easy for me to swap out into a different type of component. And I didn't have to carry, an entirely new leg on my back. But just stuff like that, that I think is going to incentivize, a whole new world of education and technology. And just at the end of the day, what this movement and what we're working towards is a society in which a 16-year-old who's playing basketball, who loses their leg to cancer, can have the same opportunity as another 16-year-old who tears their ACL playing basketball and can immediately get the medical care that they need to get back to sport. So we want disability rights, equal rights. And I hope that what we're doing with So Everybody Can Move will eventually spark what we're thinking of calling, Americans with Disabilities Act 2.0, and that it can be not just about the technology or access to devices, but this whole ecosystem of care for people with disabilities and elevating everything that we need to live our best lives.
Okay, thank you. And we have one question, which funnily enough is exactly what I wanted to talk about. So we're gonna have one more question, which is, as Nicole, you were talking and saying, people, you feel differently when you're out there and you have your equipment, and the equipment is really cool. And it looks nice, and I've noticed that where people in the past might wear long sleeves or pants to hide whatever they had, now people are in shorts because it's bionic sometimes, and it looks really great. And I think so much is going on in science, whether it's exoskeletons or bionics and hydraulics and all kinds of good stuff. And so I was thinking about this going, I want to talk about that. Now I see we have a question from Chris Marr for the panelists. That what is the most interesting or exciting, innovative, adaptive sports tech you've seen recently? And we have just like 4 minutes total. So
I can answer that actually. It's related to trail running, and it was something I was thinking about this past weekend, but there was actually it hasn't come to market yet, but a product that was showcased about a year ago that has a specific mode switch between a running blade to then being a walking foot. And just by kind of a click of a button, you could switch those two things. So I was thinking about that during my 9-hour race this past weekend, like how nice it would be to have something like this. And I need to reach out to them and see if they can, get me a prototype of it. But that has been a piece of, of prosthetics that I think has been really innovative, and would love to see more of that in the future.
And I have a comment just in here from Christine Hempel, who's talking about Billy Munger's bike adaptation, so that, whoops, it just moved, so that he can ride and train independently. He's a double amputee, as he trained for and raced the Kona Ironman. So there's some great stuff, and it is, I think, a lot about that, like how much equipment can you carry with you, and what can adapt also with your body, and your residual limb will expand and contract, and it changes the whole experience throughout. So I've seen a lot of innovations around that, of how to solve for that in real time, which is interesting.
There's also, I mean, it's obviously it's a big company, so they can throw a lot of money at research, but we were part of a project with Google called Project Guideline, where they were creating some mobile technology that would allow someone with low vision or who is blind to walk or run unassisted. And it's, it's pretty extraordinary where that's all going.
I've seen amazing AI. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You can apply it back to your sort of urban environments and and built environments. It can be used in cities and on sidewalks. So it's, I think we're headed there too, which is exciting.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of AI powered navigation technology, which is amazing. It's a great use for AI because that's what it was for, to fill in the hole. Patrick, cool
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. We're always getting great ideas. One of the things that comes to mind though, and this is maybe speaking to a larger potential solution, is we worked with a gentleman on a open source off-road hand cycle. It's called Project Mjolnir, I think. Thor's hammer. I'll butcher the pronunciation, but it's the same. So he created this whole bike that cost less than half of what's on the market right now. And it's something that once the design is out there, if something breaks, you can take it to a machine shop, get that piece reproduced, because the entire thing is on a CAD drawing. So you can build this whole bike out. You can go out, bomb the hills on it. It's an e-assist version. So it's something that really gets people out on the trails, but it's not as cost prohibitive. It is something that's shareable and it gives more access. So I think the more innovators that we can kind of boost up and promote and get excited about adaptive sport and making some really cool innovations to get more people access, I think that's a very rich vein to be tapped to get more solutions out there and also drive market costs down, because right now it's tough. They're just going up.
Right. Well, thank you, all of you. We ran out of time. I'm going to be sending out a thank you email to everybody who joined and almost joined, and along with the video of this. And in that, I'm going to put a link to each of your websites for Achilles, CAF, and so everybody can move. So anyone who wants to know more can know more and donate or whatever they want to do. Thank you, all of you, and thank everybody who came.
Thanks
Okay,
so much,
thank-
Susan.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you, Susan. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.